Fountain City United Methodist Church. We are on week 4 of our Lenten Bible study about how we give up something bad for Lent. I'm Pastor Kristen, the pastor of discipleship, and with me is Miss Donna, our children's director. And we are going to look at today running away for Lent. Is that why people leave during spring break for vacation during Lent?
Now we can't go anywhere.
They said people are still, the radio said people are now booking their trips that they had to take away last year.
Yes, our family has tried to do that. We have rebooked twice now. Mm-hmm. And we're not rebooking again. We're just going to get up one Friday sometime in the future and say, heck, we're going.
Then she'll send us a message. By the way, things are covered because Miss Donna always makes sure things are taken care of.
If we rebook, we go to quarantine, so we're not rebooking right now.
Don't do that yet. Well, we're going to look at the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verses 10 through 17, and it is the feeding of the 5,000. And so we're going to pause for a minute as you can read along and have a moment to kind of center yourself and prepare your hearts to be in Bible study with us. All right, Miss Donna, last week we were deep in the muck and the mud of 3 different types of ways that we sin that kind of muddy up ourselves. And this week we're going to look at what Jesus does to care for others that are in need of caring, that are in need of being fed. And he's talking about feeding the 5,000, but we also know that's feeding their hearts and their spirits and their minds with what's going on. I did love the story about the germs. Now you have to realize this book was written in 2012.
So, well, it's very timely. One of the children in the church drew his grandmother a picture, and used to kids would draw flowers and hearts and the solar planets. This time of year, what they're studying in school. He drew her a coronavirus. The germ we see on television, the round that with all the little things. So, this is what this is what is in this is in kids' minds. So
they haven't made us make one of those. Remember when we had to make the solar
Oh,
system?
yeah.
But
Oh,
for
yeah.
this, if for those of you that don't have the book, because we don't want you to feel left out, but it's about a pastor when he was little. He said thought he might be sick, and so he was running around the house trying to escape the germs. He thought if he could run fast enough, he could get rid of the germs. And I think we do that a lot of times. If we can deflect, if we can procrastinate, if we can run, any of those things we can do to get away from looking at ourselves.
You know, if you've been through financial peace, and I went through this years ago, one of the things that people do when they realize that they are in debt is instead of changing their behavior, they will quit going to the mailbox. They will literally stop going to the mailbox and receiving the bills, receiving the late notices. So that's a way of running away from it or being in denial.
Well, we do that with our cell phones too. That hold button or not right now button or let me text and then be like, I'll look at that later. You know, and we do that sometimes when we're trying to avoid things.
Well, I think the cell phone too is the first computer I worked with that my cell phone probably has the capacity of because I'm old to start was as big as this room.
I'm pretty sure your cell phone is better than that computer.
Better. It was bigger than this room at Nuclear Fuel Services.
Oh, wow.
And bigger than this room. And, oh, my goodness. Now, I'm carrying that. But we also, if I can text somebody, send it, and then lay my phone down, am I really dealing with that person? Nope. I'm not calling them. I'm not going to visit them. I'm not dealing with it. I'm like you say, procrastinating. And this story, when we said that our story today is on feeding the 5,000, you know, some people might think, well, that's a children's story.
Well, it's not, because we see where the disciples said, hey, we can go and rest, let them go eat. And take care of themselves, and instead Jesus sees this as a problem and a concern, and there's people that need him, so he makes the adjustment to feed them.
Well, it's an important enough story that this miracle is in all four Gospels.
Yes. Yeah.
It's in all four Gospels, so it is important because Jesus saw the issue. The issue was called to his attention, and their immediate response was, they're on their own.
The disciples were, but Jesus' first was to choose to cope rather than run.
Yes. But a thing that I noticed about this is Jesus turned and told them what to do.
Yes, he did.
He told them what to do, and through his word, he tells us what to do.
Yes.
We're told what to do. They did not argue. They did not say, Master, that's impossible. Yeah. They obeyed immediately.
They didn't say, can you have written instructions for that?
Yeah.
They just went and did what they were supposed to do because they were called to do that.
Or what's the protocol?
Yeah.
But
we're trying.
They obeyed because what he said for them to do seemed like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, they had to have faith in what they were doing, and they weren't quite there. But So the three things in this process we're looking at today is Jesus chose to cope rather than run. He used the available resources, and he turned the problem into an opportunity. What would happen if churches did that?
You know, I looked up last night, cope. Coping.
Yes.
We use that word. Oh, I just can't cope.
Or I'm dealing with it. Or you deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not mine to cope with. So I'm like, what does the word cope mean? It means to overcome. Mm-hmm. It means to manage. Nowhere in any definition of cope is to let it go or turn away.
Or procrastinate.
Coping is what one I've read from several different dictionaries. One dictionary said coping, when you cope, that's a verb, you are in battle.
Ooh, when you cope, you're in battle. Well, Jesus was in battle. He was testifying and showing who he was and what he could do. Now, this lesson did mention a movie about baseball called The Natural.
The Natural.
Did you remember watching that?
Well, you know I'm a baseball person.
Okay, so I downloaded it and watched half of it. And it was interesting, but basically what he was doing was something had happened to him, so he couldn't play. And then when he got older, he was able to play, and he was having to cope with the age differences and how people were responding to him.
But he did what he was called to do.
Yes, and I think that's a point. Some people will say, well, I'm not called, the pastors are called. I'm not called, the choir director's called. I'm not called, the worship band's called. We're all called to do something.
Well, what we're called to do is when you do spiritual gifts, and we've all had these spiritual gifts tests, but when we have a spiritual gifts test, and here are my 3 strengths, that means that's the natural ability that is born in me. I can do those things to a certain extent, and on my own with my natural gifts. When I get out of the boat, so to speak, and I start saying, okay, this is a weakness of mine, that doesn't give me permission just because it's not a great strength. If God tells me to minister to someone through one of these other ways, then I don't have permission to not do it because it's not one of my strengths. I have great permission and authority with Christ to call on him to lead me and guide me through it.
Well, and those are 2 things. Those are spiritual gifts. And have you ever been told, I've been told, like, if you don't nurture those gifts, if you don't put them into use, they kind of start to fade. And as far as not having a gift, it reminds me of my brother and dad went on a mission trip to Mississippi after one of the hurricanes, and there was a Methodist church that was struggling, and they still wanted to worship. So that Sunday morning they were trying to worship, and the pastor asked if anybody could come up and help be in the choir because their folks were missing. It was just a very difficult time. And my brother, who I've never really seen him sing in his entire life, looked at my dad and said, okay, let's be choir members today. And he went forward to sing. And I'll tell you, and he will too, he did not have that gift. But at that time, God needed him to get up and be supportive of this church. So he went to the choir and he sang. And I'm still amazed. I hate that I missed that. I didn't get to see it, but that's how God works with us.
If we open our heart to what God, he will put someone in our path.
Yep.
He will put someone in our path. He will put us in someone's path. Maybe we need to be ministered to. And like last week, we talked about being Mama Janie. Yeah. I just wonder if anybody decided to try and be a Mama Janie and just go out and
that's good.
And talk to somebody. Yeah. Or did God put it on your heart? Have we prayed? Sometimes I have to really pray and say, God, because I have my, the people that are sick, I will text them in the morning, and children, I will text. I'm a morning person. I know y'all don't particularly care for that trait in me, but I am. So
I get my text in the morning. It's okay.
But to stop sometimes and say, God, who do you want me to talk to today?
That's right. Or who do I need to check on? And I've always told folks, if something or somebody pops into your head as you're reading scripture or as you're worshiping or as you're walking with God on your daily walk or run, if that person pops into your head, then that's a nudge that God's giving you to follow through with them. And I like the part where it tells us we seemed at first to be heavy, great burdened, that God turns our burdens into blessings. And it seems kind of cliche or one of those statements that you would get on the farmhouse sign and you put it in your house. But we've seen that happen with folks.
I our resources are different right now.
Yeah.
Due to COVID, just back to the movie where the guy did not realize the resource he had in the older guy.
That's true.
He just saw him as someone was really kind of annoying, and he's going to be there and this, that, and the other. But when it came down to it, he was a tremendous resource. And during this time of COVID, the pandemic, we've had to draw inward in our homes. We've had to change our way of life tremendously. It's caused me to look what we are doing.
I know. I keep thinking, and Mark and I have joked over and over again, we would not be doing this had it not been for COVID. And we were forced, strongly kicked in the hiney to be on video because it was necessary. But we probably should have been doing it before.
Well,
and it was fear.
We had to reevaluate our resources. What we know what we can't do.
Yeah.
So what is available to us that we can do? And that's a family question.
Yes.
That's an individual question. That's a community question. And I did like the story about Crazy Leroy. Crazy Leroy, because, and God rest his soul, he went to be with Jesus not long ago. We had a man in our town of Irwin, Tennessee, that I grew up in, Gomer. Gomer rode his bicycle. Gomer was kind of like Crazy Leroy, but Gomer really ran the town.
Yeah.
Because did Gomer have education? No. Did he have limits? Yes, he had limits. Did people love him? Yes, they did. One of the biggest funerals Irwin has seen about a year ago was Gomer's. But Gomer had flat common sense, just like Crazy Leroy did.
There was a problem with a car, and he was able to solve that problem in this story, and everybody else that might have thought they were better than Leroy was unable to solve that problem. And so, this week, as you're working through this with us, can you tell us some stories? Like, who's your Leroy? Have you seen that happen? Where somebody's been disregarded, and yet then when their gifts got to shine through, we thought, wow, where have they been, and why haven't we noticed? And there's been times where I've had to ask God forgiveness for folks in the congregation I was serving, not knowing the gifts that they had and helping them use them. I try my hardest, but you don't catch all of them. What are some gifts that you have that you think you can use? What are some gifts that you are hiding? What's God's working on you this week?
What have you tried to run away from in your life?
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to run away from something, even if it's something as simple as, I don't want to go out with this couple for dinner tonight, back when we could do that. Do you all remember?
I don't remember that.
But what have we tried? What have I tried to run away from, and did it benefit me? Or did I let God, was I willing to turn it over to God? Am I willing to turn it over to God?
Yeah. So as we work through that, and we hope that you will work through that, I like that we have gone from looking at the sins and we're moving into some action points, what we need to do, but we are only following those action points that are from Jesus. And so as we close today, we'll close in prayer, and we'll hope to see you again next week. Dear God, thank you for giving us the wisdom and courage to face our problems and to not run away from them. Help us to deal with problems productively and to help others do the same. Lord, help us to use our gifts that you have given us to recognize gifts in other folks and to lift one another up. Remind us that you are always just a prayer away and eager to advise us on how to solve our problems. Lord, it's my hope and prayer that this day and throughout this week we would seek you in all that we do, and that your glory would shine through our actions. Amen.